Good morning, X Winterview. Back again. Coffee in the system. Throat feeling a little bit less dry. Mind firing on all 12 cylinders. It's a V12 mind. Pumping information to the world imagined to be out there. This dialogue is a brief dialogue for Annastacey by special request. To her dear friend, X Winterview. Me. Annastacey has asked, is there a way to solve problems without thinking about them? Let's find out. Stay tuned and see what happens as I keep talking. First of all, what is a problem? Well, let's define it. A problem we look at from the point of view of reference points and framework around which the reference points operate. You might say the rules of the domain. Let's imagine we are traveling through space and we land on a planet unfamiliar to us. We are excited to explore. Soon thereafter, we meet a community of aliens living on the planet who we decide to befriend or at least try and understand. It seems though, no matter what we do to understand, it's always based on our own beliefs about ourselves. We use, in other words, our own points of reference to try and figure out what the aliens are up to. For instance, we know that humans need to eat. So we presume, well, maybe the aliens need to eat as well. And we observe and we see them gathering objects in fields, we'll say, and depositing these objects into what look like mouths in the aliens' bodies. We extrapolate, we go, well, that's what we do, sort of thing. When we eat, we look for objects in fields and put them in mouths. So we hypothesize, perhaps the aliens are eating. And of course, we could cut one open and look at the digestive system and so forth to get a better understanding of that process. But again, it's coming from our beliefs and our points of reference about digestion, etc. From the aliens' point of view, they'll be looking at us and wondering something similar, perhaps. They're wondering, I wonder how often the humans pray to the moon goddess Undugu. I wonder if they do that as regularly as we do. And we know that we pray to the moon goddess by sitting on a porcelain seat and depositing waste from our bodies into a watery tank which is taken away with a flushing item. This is what the aliens are thinking. And then they see humans doing the same behavior. They go, wow, look, there is a human sitting on a porcelain seat, depositing bodily waste into some water and flushing it away. They too must be worshipping the moon goddess, Ndugu. Of course, we know that is a fiction. That is not how humans worship the moon goddess, Ndugu. No, just kidding. That is the aliens using their own points of reference to make decisions about what the humans are up to. So you can see confusion may abound from both sides, not knowing, not understanding where the other is coming from at the most fundamental level, the reference point level. Now, how does this relate to solving problems? It does as follows. One must be very clear from the outset that the problem only exists within a frame of reference. There is no such thing as a universal problem, a problem that everyone has, you might even say, unless everyone has the same reference point, same framework, and then of course that problem might arise for everyone. So we decide first and foremost, what is the frame around which this problem exists? Let us choose a day-to-day example. Work is a good example. There's always problems at work, at least if you work where I work. Let's talk about arriving at work on time. The age-old battle between employer and employee. From the employer's point of view, those pesky employees, they just refuse to arrive at 9 o'clock, even though I told them they have to, or they'll be beaten with a stick. They still don't do it. The employees are like, there's so many reasons why I can't arrive at 9 o'clock. Just relax, boss. God damn it. Kind of thing. Don't beat me with that stick. I can't take it. Now, the problem from the boss's point of view, is it a universal problem? Maybe. From the employee's point of view, is it universal? Perhaps. Let's start with the frame of reference. The frame of reference is that the rules of the employment place clearly state employees must arrive no later than 9 a.m. in the morning. So there's our frame of reference. Could be universal, but I'm sure there are places of employment without such rules. So from the boss's perspective, the employee who arrives after 9 a.m. in the morning is wrong. And the employee who arrives before it is correct, you might say. A very simple example with a very simple answer. The solution, therefore, to the problem of arriving later than 9 probably rests on the employee. It is up to the employee to decide how can they modify their behavior to arrive before 9 o'clock in the morning. Perhaps it's up to the employer to help the employee think of ways, creatively maybe, that they can arrive before 9. This is a problem bound by the rules of employment. And it is only a problem so far as the employee wishes to keep their job. If the employee had no interest in keeping their job, they would not feel that the behavior of arriving after 9 is a problem. They would in due course be sacked for their refusal to arrive at the designated time and simply, benignly, without fuss, shrug and move on to something else. So there's the other part of problems. First is they're bound within the context of the rules of the situation, and second, there's value and meaning imbued on them. This second part is worth looking at in a little bit more depth because it ties into other reference points. If I didn't care about the rules of work, if I just simply did not care, am I right or am I wrong? Let us look at the context first. In the rules of this particular workplace, is there any rule that states that the employee must care deeply about their job? No. No rule whatsoever. So, if the boss was to chastise the employee for not caring enough about their job, the boss would be in violation of the rules of that setting. Why would the boss be in violation? Because there's no point of reference by which the boss can make that claim about whether the employee cares or does not care. The boss might have cultural notions about how one should care about their job, ideas that they have learned themselves over time. Perhaps they are A-type personality, that is, the ones who always try and do their best, always try and please others, are always going at 1,000 miles an hour. If you have the A-type boss, they might bring in their own A-type frame of reference into their position of boss, but make the critical error of judgment when talking to their employee of presuming that their own A-type framework applies equally to all. So for the employee, the question is simple. Yes, there are consequences to not turning up at 9. That is stated quite clearly in the Code of Conduct for the workplace. But no, I do not have to give a shit, because that is not stated anywhere in the Code of Conduct. Of course, as a mature working adult, we know that the attitude of not giving a shit might have negative consequences for your long-term employment stability. However, that is your problem, and not the employer's problem. The employer, in this example at least, might highly value the employee's contribution. They might be a genius employee, so when they eventually do bother to turn up at work, they outperform all the other staff 10 to 1 across every key performance indicator, the dreaded KPI, such that the boss is left in a quandary. This employee keeps breaking the rules by arriving late, yet they outshine all my other staff, and I don't know what to do. I want to fire them because they're naughty, but yet they make me so much money. Oh no. So now the boss has a problem, it seems. Why is it a problem for the boss? Once again, we come back to reference points. The employee is valued because they make the company a lot of money, which is another point of reference. To have a lot of money is good. To lose money, bad. So, when the boss's boss looks upon that department and sees, wow, look at all the money coming in to the apartment, and says that is good, that is a point of reference. Now, it could be stated clearly in the Code of Conduct or the mission statement for the business to earn lots of money is what we're all about. In which case, that employee is doing something truthful or correct within the context and setting of the rules of that organization. However, if that was not clearly stated in anywhere in the framework of the organization, that is, earning money, it didn't matter if you earned it or lost it, then once again, the boss's own opinion on earning money would be the factor here. And once again, the boss would have the problem personally because they're imbuing their own judgments on the employee's performance about whether they earn or do not earn money. Right, I think I've covered that quite adequately. So we see that problems are only bound by context of the setting in which they arise. One must be very cautious, I guess, that the emotions that they might feel could be personally driven by personal reference points, but actually not apply to others around them, nor the setting that they find themselves in. So how do you solve a problem without thinking about it? The very first step would be, again, to identify the framework. What is the framework in which I currently operate and in which the problem arises? If I'm arriving after 9 consistently for an place of employment that says I need to arrive before 9, then I have a problem. And that problem is mine. It is my problem. The onus, therefore, is on me to solve that problem. Once I've figured out that it's my problem and it does relate to the setting, and it is indeed a genuine problem, the solution is simple. One does not need to think about it. One just uses the reference point. I have to be there before 9, and that's that. If you find yourself fretting over a problem and thinking about it, it is likely that you do not know the reference point. It is likely that you are unclear where that exists. It is likely that you have brought one rule set of framework. I'll start that sentence again. The rules of one framework across to the rules of another framework, where they do not match. We could go back to the old science versus religion problem, so to speak. Within the framework of religion, there's a God, let's just say, in this particular religion, who is in charge of doing stuff. God, in this example, is the causal agent of phenomena of the world, and praying to God helps one curry favour with that God. Of course, to go to your job as a scientist the next day in the lab, and to say, well, we need to figure out how to make God cause this chemical reaction, would probably raise a few eyebrows, let's just say, in that employment setting. It would be a mistake, a foolish mistake, in fact, to bring that particular rule of religion across and expect it to work in your job as a biochemist the next day. Similarly, taking the rules of biochemistry to your church and saying something along the lines of, what I need to do is figure out the right chemical constituents of God, and then everything will be great. Life will be perfect, so to speak. Would be another grave error. So it's likely, once again, that when a problem exists, it is overlapping domains with different rules that is the problem, and not any inherent problem. I'd like to also draw attention to a very famous novel that I read. I quite enjoyed it. Some people don't like it. It's a very weighty, long, and in some ways monotonous tome, but I quite enjoyed it. And that is Atlas Shrugged. The book Atlas Shrugged, by the author Rand, I think the surname. First name escapes me. Can't remember. Anyway, in this book, there was a famous quote by one of the protagonists that, or not a quote, more of an admonishment in the book, that one needs to always check the premise. If there seems to be a problem, you must check the premise, or premises. Premisi? I don't know. Check the premises, and you will find invariably that if there's a problem, one of your premises is wrong. I found this a very helpful understanding at the time, that if I think there's a problem or a mistake, perhaps the way I'm thinking about it at a fundamental level is mistaken. Perhaps one of my assumptions is mistaken. So, the rule is, when a problem arises, first, check your assumptions. Make sure your assumptions are correct. And if they are, then the problem, if it hasn't resolved itself, is likely one of crossing contexts, failure to recognize reference points. Well, I don't know if I really hit the nail on that one, but it was a good stab, I think. This has been X Winterview, with a brief dialogue on solving problems without thinking about them too much, at least. For his dear friend Annastacey, comments are welcome.